My wife's friends played a prank, abandoning me 280 miles from home to teach me a lesson, but my unexpected comeback left them stunned. To be honest, I didn't even want to go on that stupid cabin trip. Every year, my wife and her friends did this bonding retreat thing, which really just meant 7 adults pretending they weren't miserable while drinking overpriced coffee and complaining about people not there. I dodged it for 3 years, always saying I had to work late at the shop or that my boss needed me over the weekend. It wasn't even a lie. My boss always needed something because he was a lazy prick who thought yelling counted as leadership. I, Simon, 35, male, am a mechanic. I've been one since I was 18. Cars make sense to me. People don't, especially my boss, Larry, 50 years old, who thinks yelling my name across the garage every 10 minutes somehow makes him a hands-on manager. The guy couldn't change a tire without Googling it, but he walked around calling me kid like he was doing me a favor by letting me breathe the same air. Every time I'd fix something complicated, he'd march up to the customer like he did it himself. Told my guys what to look for, he'd say. Yeah, right. The only thing Larry ever found was new ways to be useless. So, yeah, between that and my wife, Hannah, nagging about how I never do anything social, I wasn't exactly living the dream. I worked too much, got paid too little, and somehow still ended up being the bad guy because I liked peace and quiet. This year, though, she wasn't taking no for an answer. Everyone wants you there this time, babe, she said. I laughed. Yeah, sure. Everyone loved the quiet mechanic who made sarcastic comments every time someone tried to manifest positive energy. She gave me that face, you know, the one women give when you've already lost the argument, but they let you think you still have a choice. So, I went. We packed up her friend Maddie's SUV early Saturday morning, 6 people, 1 vehicle, and way too much perfume. The second we hit the highway, I knew I'd made a mistake. Her friends were the kind of people who call every mildly inconvenient thing traumatic. Hannah sat up front with Maddie, laughing way too hard at whatever podcast they had on, while the back seat was full of whispers and quiet giggles. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, someone was smirking, probably talking about how grumpy I looked. I tried zoning out, watching the trees blur past, but the whole ride felt off. They'd stop talking when I spoke up, then start again in low voices. Hannah flashed that polite, PR face smile people use when they're lying through their teeth. My gut told me something was weird, but I brushed it off. I figured maybe they were planning some dumb surprise, like one of those group trust games where you fall backward and hope no one lets you hit the ground. We drove for hours. The farther we got, the less signal my phone had. Eventually, it just said no service. The road turned to dirt and then to what looked like a logging trail. I half joked, "You sure this is the right way and not where horror movies start?" Nobody laughed. They just exchanged glances. Finally, we pulled up to the cabin, a big wooden place sitting on a patch of dirt surrounded by endless trees. Maddie said she'd booked it from some local guy who rents it out every summer. Apparently, it belonged to an older man in town who lets people use it for off-grid weekends. No other houses in sight. Just silence and the sound of the SUV's engine cooling off. The air smelled like pine and old rain. Cute, right? Maddie said, hopping out. Yeah, I said. If you like places where murders go unsolved, they laughed politely, but nobody denied it. I hauled our bags out while the rest of them acted like they were setting up camp for a reality show. Hannah ran around pointing out rustic charm, creaky floors, dusty curtains, and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't worked since the 1980s. At dinner, they kept sharing inside jokes I didn't get. Every time I asked what was funny, someone said, "Oh, nothing," in that way that obviously means it's about you. Hannah was overly sweet the whole night, acting like I was some fragile guest who might break if she didn't hold my hand every 5 minutes. When I offered to help clean up, Maddie waved me off. "You've done enough today, hero," she said with a grin. I remember thinking, what the hell does that even mean? Hannah came to me wearing that fake smile again. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just soaking in all this fresh air and awkward tension," I said. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. "Try to have fun, please." "For me?" "Sure," I said, even though we both knew I didn't mean it. When we went to bed, I couldn't shake the weird feeling. The laughter, the looks, the overpacked supplies, everything felt staged. I told myself I was just tired, maybe being paranoid. But deep down, something in my gut whispered this trip was going to go sideways. And man, I should have listened. The next morning, I woke up late, and my first thought was that everyone had already gotten up and started breakfast. The cabin was too quiet, but I figured maybe they'd gone outside to take those fake morning nature selfies people love posting with captions like "disconnect to reconnect." I rolled out of bed, pulled on my jeans, and walked into the main room. Empty. Not just quiet, empty. The chatter, the giggles, the fake cheer, it was all gone. Every bag, jacket, and piece of luggage that wasn't mine had disappeared. At first, I thought maybe they'd gone for a hike. I checked the kitchen, nothing but something stuck to the table. A bright yellow sticky note, right in the middle. It said, "Build some character," with a stupid smiley face. I just stood there for a second, staring at it. My brain needed a minute to process. That was it. No explanation, no joke, no back in 10. Just those 3 words and that smiley face. I stepped to the window, and that's when I heard it, laughing, loud, obnoxious, echoing across the trees. I looked out just in time to see the SUV bouncing down the dirt path. Hannah's blonde hair was sticking out the passenger window. Maddie was in the driver's seat. Someone in the back had their phone up, recording. They were laughing so hard they were practically crying. For a second, I couldn't move. It felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's nightmare. Then the shock turned into something else, heat, anger. I shoved the door open and ran onto the porch. "Are you kidding me?" I shouted. The SUV didn't stop. The laughter got louder, fading as the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared into the woods. Dust kicked up behind them, floating in the air like smoke. I stood there, 280 miles away from home, barefoot, the note crumpled in my hand. I swear I could still hear them laughing long after they were gone. At first, I wanted to grab my phone and call someone, anyone. But when I looked at the signal bar, it said exactly what I expected, no service. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some quick prank. They planned this. The whispering in the car, the extra luggage, the fake smiles, the way Hannah kept checking if I brought enough stuff, it all made sense now. I looked back inside the cabin. There was food in the fridge, some canned soup, eggs, basic stuff. They hadn't left me with nothing, but it was still clear they wanted to watch me panic. It wasn't funny. It wasn't some team bonding exercise. It was humiliation. For a minute, I honestly considered trying to walk back. But where would I even go? The nearest gas station was probably 20 miles away. I didn't know the area, and I wasn't about to wander through the woods like some lost hiker just to prove a point. So, I sat down on the porch and thought. The anger was fading, replaced by something weirdly calm, like my brain was rebooting and realizing this was the first time in years that I didn't have to do anything. Nobody was yelling at me to fix something. Nobody was asking for favors. No phone buzzing every 5 minutes. It was just quiet. I stood up, stretched, and looked around. Trees as far as the eye could see. "All right," I muttered. "Let's see what kind of character you want me to build." I started going through the cabin. The place had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a main room with a fireplace, and a small kitchen. The pantry had enough canned food to last a week or 2 if I rationed. There was an old tool set, a few flashlights, and a big box of matches. I checked the back porch next, a stack of chopped wood, a rusted shovel, and a few empty propane tanks. Whoever owned this place before definitely knew how to live out here. I wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted. They probably thought I'd freak out, call for help, cry, whatever. Nah, they'd underestimated me. If anything, they'd handed me the one thing I've been craving for years, a break. No boss breathing down my neck. No wife giving me attitude because I didn't open up emotionally after 10 hours at the shop. Just me and the sound of wind. I cleaned up the kitchen a little, made some coffee with the old percolator I found, and sat by the window. For the first time in years, I drank it while it was still hot. Later, I walked around the property. Behind the cabin was a small shed, half buried under vines. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. The padlock was rusted, but I figured I'd deal with that later. The shed could wait. The day went slow, but in a good way. I found a few fishing poles in the corner of the porch and made a mental note to check out the creek tomorrow. The sky was turning orange by the time I went back inside. They thought this would break me. What they didn't realize was that I was already broken long before this trip. The job, the noise, the fake smiles, all of it. But this? This was different. This wasn't punishment. It was a reset button. By the time the sun went down, I had a fire going, a warm meal, and no one telling me what to do. I sat back on the old couch, listening to the crackle of the wood. "Guess I'll build some character then," I said to the empty room. For once, it wasn't just a line. I believed it. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. No yelling, no engines revving, no boss hollering my name across the garage. Just wind outside and the soft ticking of the old clock. Nothing demanding my attention for once. For a minute, I didn't even move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing that no one in the world expected anything from me right now. After breakfast, I decided to poke around the cabin a little more. I found a stack of dusty journals, real old school, leather-bound, yellowed paper. Curiosity got me, so I sat down and started flipping through. Most of the entries were dated decades back. A family used to come up here every summer. Handwritten notes about fishing spots, local trails. Some entries even mentioned a nearby town about 15 miles south that might be useful later, but for now, I wasn't going anywhere. One of the last journals was from a guy in the early 2000s. He wrote about catching trout in the stream, said the water was clean enough to drink if you boiled it first. He even sketched a rough map of the area. The guy clearly loved the place. I could see why. By afternoon, I'd organized what supplies I had, made a small checklist, and even fixed the door hinge that had been squeaking. Working with my hands again without someone barking orders felt good. When the sun started dipping behind the trees, I grabbed an old chair and sat on the porch. The air was cooler now. Then I saw it, a small flicker of light between the trees. Not firelight, too white and sharp. A flashlight beam, moving slowly, like someone walking. At first, my heart jumped a little. I figured maybe Hannah or one of her friends had come back early, realizing how messed up their little joke was. But as the light got closer, I saw a single figure, not a group. He was tall, maybe in his 60s, wearing a flannel jacket and a hat. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a wrench I'd been using earlier, and stood on the porch, waiting. The guy stopped a few yards away, raising his free hand. "Evening, son," he said, voice calm, deep, and friendly. "Didn't mean to startle you." I lowered the wrench but didn't relax completely. "You're a long way from town," I said. He smiled. "Could say the same for you." He stepped into the light from the porch, an older guy, gray beard, weathered face, eyes that looked like he'd seen everything twice and didn't care much for either time. "Name's Earl," he said. "I live a few miles that way." He nodded back through the trees. "Saw smoke from your chimney yesterday. Figured I'd come check if someone moved into the cabin again." I leaned against the railing. "Moved in's one way to put it." We talked for a while, and I told him what happened, the trip, the build character note, the car driving off, the laughter. Earl just listened, occasionally shaking his head like he'd heard worse but still couldn't believe it. When I finished, he chuckled, though not meanly. "You married into the wrong crowd, son." "Tell me about it," I said. "They called it a joke." "I call it free time." He laughed harder this time. "That's one way to spin it." "You doing all right out here?" "Yeah," I said. "Got food, got water, got quiet." "That last one's my favorite." Earl nodded. "That's the thing about quiet. It tells you who you really are." He reached into the old canvas bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out a few items, a couple of canned goods, a flashlight, and a pack of batteries. "Here," he said. "Figured you might be short on some basics." I raised an eyebrow. "You always bring gifts for strangers?" He grinned. "Only for the ones who look like they could use them. I got plenty." "You'll pay me back by not dying out here," I laughed. "Deal." He pointed toward the back of the cabin. "There's an old shed back there. Belongs to the original owners. Might be some tools or something you can use. Roof's half caved in, so watch your step." "Appreciate the tip," I said. He gave a small nod, turned his flashlight on again, and started walking back into the trees. The next morning, I followed Earl's directions to the shed. It was half hidden behind thick vines and weeds. The door was hanging off one hinge, and a rusty padlock dangled uselessly from it. I gave it one pull, and the whole thing came off. Inside, it smelled like dust and old oil. My eyes landed on something big covered in a tarp. I tugged the tarp back, and my heart skipped a beat. A Ford Mustang, mid-70s, maybe a 73. Covered in dust and rust, but still beautiful. The kind of car that begged to be brought back to life. Keys were hanging on a nail beside the door, like someone had planned to come back for it. I stood there staring for a while, and for the first time since they left me here, I grinned, a real grin, not the fake kind you do for peacekeeping. "Well," I said out loud, "guess I found my next project." The silence didn't answer, but it didn't need to. It already felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. I grabbed the flashlight Earl had given me and headed straight for that shed again. Seeing that Mustang sitting there under the tarp had kept me awake half the night. I couldn't stop thinking about it, the lines, the rust, the potential. When I pulled the tarp off again, I stood there like a kid looking at a Christmas present he wasn't supposed to touch. It was a mess, sure, dust thick enough to write your name in, tires flat, one headlight cracked, and a family of spiders that looked like they'd been paying rent. But under all that, it was still a Mustang. I ran my hand along the hood, leaving a streak through the dirt. "You and me," I said quietly. "We're both overdue for a rebuild." I popped the hood and took a look. The engine was greasy, half seized, but not dead. The tank smelled like varnish, so I drained the old gas, swapped the filter, and poured in some fresh fuel I found in a dusty jerry can tucked behind the workbench. Whoever left this here actually took decent care of it for a while. The battery was toast, and the spark plugs were ancient, but the belts weren't snapped, and there was still oil in the pan, barely, but still. For the first time since being left here, I felt that familiar excitement again, the kind that hits you when you know something broken can still be fixed. I dug around the shed and found an old toolbox, dusty but solid. Some of the wrenches were rusted stiff, but I cleaned them up as best I could. There was even a small air compressor tucked in the corner. I hauled it all outside, set up a makeshift workbench on the porch, and got to work. By mid-afternoon, I had grease up to my elbows and a grin that hadn't shown up in years. There was still grid power running to the cabin, barely, but enough to keep a light bulb and that ancient charger alive. I found an old battery charger in the shed, hooked it up, and left it overnight. The next morning, I bolted the battery in, double-checked everything, and turned the key. Nothing, not even a cough. I wasn't surprised. Old engines are like old men, they don't wake up easy after years of sleeping. I popped the hood again, tinkered with the carburetor, cleaned the plugs, tapped the starter a few times. Then I tried again. This time, the engine coughed, sputtered, and belched out a cloud of gray smoke that smelled like pure nostalgia. I laughed out loud. That's it, baby. Come on, show me what you got. A few more turns of the key, and the Mustang roared, rough, loud, shaky, but alive. I swear I could have hugged it. The echo of that engine filled the woods, bouncing off the trees. For a minute, I just stood there, soaking it in. That sound, that was freedom. That was mine. After letting it idle for a bit, I bled the front brakes, aired the tires up with that little compressor, and kept it under 20 on the back roads. The tires were half flat, the brakes squealed like hell, but it moved. Over the next few days, I fixed it up more, replaced what I could with parts scavenged from random junk piles around the shed, cleaned the interior, patched the seats, and even managed to polish the windshield enough to see through. The deeper I got into it, the more I realized how much time I'd wasted in that shop under someone else's rules. I'd been building someone else's dream while mine rusted out. When I was finally satisfied that the car wouldn't fall apart under me, I filled a couple of jugs from the creek for water, packed some canned food, and decided to drive to the town I'd read about in those old journals. When I finally trusted the old girl enough to move, I tossed a spare belt in the trunk and packed a jug of creek water just in case she coughed halfway there. 15 miles later, I hit pavement, cracked, faded, but still smoother than I expected. Then came the signs of life, an old gas station, a general store, a diner with a flickering open sign. The town looked like something out of a postcard that hadn't been updated since 1985. A few people stood outside the diner talking, one guy sweeping the front steps. When they saw the Mustang roll up, every head turned. I parked out front and got out. My clothes were still stained with grease, but I didn't care. As soon as I hit Main Street, my phone buzzed like it had been waiting for miles. 3 bars suddenly popped up out of nowhere. A woman in her 50s with graying hair came out, wiping her hands on an apron. "You drive that thing all the way up here?" she asked. "Just from the woods," I said. "Brought it back from the dead." Inside, the diner smelled like coffee, bacon, and something fried. I ordered the cheapest breakfast plate on the menu and inhaled it. The waitress kept looking at me like she wanted to ask something. "So," I finally said, "go ahead, you new around here?" She asked. "Sort of," I said. "Got left up at the cabin a few miles north." Her eyebrows lifted. "Left?" "Yeah," I said. "Long story involving bad humor and worse friends." She laughed. "Well, you're not the first city guy to get ditched out here." "You staying?" "Maybe," I said. Thinking about it, by the time I finished my coffee, the owner came out from the kitchen, a broad man with a beard that looked like it could filter gravel. "You said you fix cars?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Been a mechanic since before YouTube told people how to do it wrong." He laughed. "You free tomorrow morning? Got an old truck out back that's been giving me trouble. Can't afford a shop right now." "Sure," I said. "I'll take a look." He nodded. "I'll pay cash and feed you breakfast." "Deal?" "Best offer I've had in years," I said. When I walked out, the sun was high, the Mustang gleaming under it like it knew it still had a purpose. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stuck or angry. I wasn't waiting for permission or pretending to be grateful. I was working on my own terms, driving my own path, and damn, it felt good. The next morning, I showed up at the diner before sunrise. The owner, a guy named Rick, was already outside, wiping his hands on a rag and staring at an old blue Chevy pickup parked behind the building. "Morning," I said, stretching. He grunted. "Morning. You weren't kidding about showing up early." "I'm a mechanic," I said. "We're born tired." The truck wasn't in great shape. After 20 minutes, I found the problem: a cracked fuel line and a bad gasket. I told him I could fix it if he didn't mind a few creative adjustments. "Creative sounds cheaper than new parts," he said. An hour later, the truck started up smoother than it probably had in years. Rick stared at it like I'd just performed some kind of miracle. "You're hired," he said immediately. "I'll pay cash if you help me out a few days a week. I can't find anyone around here who knows what they're doing anymore." I shrugged. "I'm not going anywhere for a while, so yeah, deal." He paid me right there, plus breakfast. Word spread faster than oil on concrete. By the third day, a guy from the gas station came by asking if I could take a look at his Jeep. Then another guy from the general store said his cousin's van wouldn't start. Before I knew it, I had a steady line of people asking for help. They started calling me the city mechanic who got left behind, not in a mean way. It was almost a badge of honor. I'd show up in my greasy jeans, fix their problems, and end up having lunch or coffee with them afterward. One guy, Tom, ran the local hardware store. He offered me a small shed behind his shop to use as a workspace. I cleaned it out, set up my tools, and by the end of the week, it looked like a mini garage. My hands were cracked, my clothes were ruined, but I hadn't smiled this much in years. There was something about fixing things here that felt different. Back in the city, repairs were just transactions: get it done, get paid, move to the next headache. Here, people shook your hand after. They looked you in the eye and said, "Thank you," like they actually meant it. I didn't realize how starved I'd been for that kind of basic respect. A few days later, I finally checked my phone. It had been off since I'd left the cabin to find the town. When I turned it on, it lit up like a Christmas tree: 47 unread messages, 13 missed calls, and a handful of voicemails. The first few were from Hannah. "Okay, haha, very funny. You proved your point. Come back now. You're really milking this, huh? Fine, stay a few days. Maybe it'll help you calm down. Can you at least text me so people stop asking where you are?" Then they got worse: "You're making me look bad. Everyone's asking questions. This is getting embarrassing. Stop acting like a child. If you wanted attention, you could have just said so." I scrolled through all of it and laughed quietly. She had no idea. To her, this was still some game. She couldn't imagine that maybe I didn't want to go back. I put the phone down, wiped my hands on a rag, and went back to work on an old carburetor that had been giving me trouble. The smell of oil and metal beat the smell of overpriced perfume any day. After a week, I realized something crazy. I hadn't thought about home once. Not my job, not Hannah, not the noise. Just peace. Real peace. A few nights later, I checked my phone again. More messages: "This isn't funny anymore. You're embarrassing both of us. You're acting like a psycho. Just come home." Then a final one: "If you stay there, don't bother coming back. We're done." I stared at it for a long time and laughed. Did she really think I'd be back with her after this circus? I put the phone down. Somewhere out there, my old life was waiting: my boss, my wife, the endless cycle of pretending to be okay. But here, things made sense. People needed help. I had skills. And that was enough. I went back inside the shed, wiped off the carburetor, and put it back in place. The engine turned over on the first try, smooth, strong. I grinned and said to myself, "Guess I'm not the one who needed fixing." And for the first time in my entire life, I meant that, too. A few weeks passed like that. I started paying rent for the cabin. The owner, some old guy in town, said he'd been trying to rent it for years, but nobody wanted it because it was too old and too far out. Worked fine for me: cheap, quiet, and all mine for the time being. Then one afternoon, I pulled up to the cabin after work, and there they were, Hannah and her friends. An SUV parked crooked in the dirt, like they'd shown up in a hurry. I cut the engine and just sat there for a second, watching them standing near the porch. They were all dressed like they were filming an ad for expensive hiking gear: sunglasses, fake smiles, the whole "we didn't do anything wrong" vibe. Hannah was at the front, hands on her hips, shifting her weight like she was about to lecture me. Maddie stood beside her with that smug grin she always had, and the others hung back, pretending to look concerned. I got out of the car slowly, wiping my hands on a rag, still in my work shirt with my name stitched on the pocket. "Wow," I said. "You guys took a wrong turn, or just remembered I exist?" Hannah sighed, like she'd been waiting for that line. "We didn't think you'd actually stay here," she said. "You made your point, okay? It was a joke that went too far." "Too far?" I repeated. You mean the part where you abandoned me 280 miles from home? Or the part where you filmed it like a prank video? Maddie rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. We left you food, and you clearly survived. You should be laughing about it now. Yeah, I said. I laughed. Just not the way you wanted. Hannah stepped closer, forcing a sweet tone that didn't match her face. Look, can we not do this here? You're really embarrassing me. People have been asking where you are. Tell them I'm working, I said, walking past her toward the porch. Honest living, you know. It's that thing people do when they're not busy pulling stunts for attention. Her jaw tightened. You think you're better than us now? I turned around. No, I just think I'm done pretending I'm not. That landed harder than I expected. Maddie crossed her arms, muttering, unbelievable. One of the other friends tried to play peacemaker. Okay, this doesn't have to get ugly. We came here because we care, and we wanted to make things right, right? I said, leaning on the porch railing. You cared so much you vanished before breakfast. That's real friendship right there. Hannah's fake sweetness cracked. You're seriously overreacting. We were joking. Everyone thought it'd be funny, she continued. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just come home. I smiled a little. I am home. Hannah's voice went sharp. Don't start with that. You don't belong here. You have a job. A house. Had a job, I cut in. And the house? You can start paying the rent by yourself. I'm not going back. Stop being childish, she snapped. This time, I laughed, low and steady. Yeah, it did. You told me to build character. I did. They went silent. Even Maddie didn't have a comeback for that. I stepped down off the porch and walked toward my car. You know, it's funny, I said. You all thought I'd beg to come home, that I'd panic or fall apart. But you did me a favor. I got rid of all the noise. And without that noise, I finally saw what mattered. And what's that? Hannah asked. Me, I said simply. My life, my peace. The part of me you kept trying to fix when nothing was broken except your expectations. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I saw her mask slip. The tone changed fast after that. The performance dropped. Whatever act she'd been rehearsing fell apart in a second. Hannah's voice shook as she tried to guilt me again. You're ruining everything we built together. What did we build, Hannah? I asked. A marriage where you treat me like a prop in front of your friends? A life where I hate waking up every morning? You didn't build anything. You maintained a routine. She started crying then, or maybe pretending to. I couldn't tell anymore. I just wanted you to be stronger, she said. I nodded slowly. You got your wish. I'm stronger now, just not for you. For a long moment, nobody said a word. Just the wind moving through the trees and a loose board on the porch creaking under my boot. Finally, Maddie huffed. You're unbelievable. We drove all the way up here for nothing. Pretty much, I said. But hey, thanks for stopping by. I was starting to wonder if I'd have to send you a thank you card. Hannah looked at me like she didn't recognize who I was. Maybe she didn't. Maybe this was the first time she was seeing the version of me that didn't fold, didn't apologize, didn't chase her approval. When they realized I wasn't budging, they gave up. Hannah turned away first, muttering something under her breath. The others followed, stomping back to their SUV. Doors slammed, engines started, and just like that, they were gone again, the same dirt road, same sound of tires fading into the trees. I looked down at my hands, still stained with grease, and couldn't help but laugh to myself. Build some character, I said out loud. Yeah, nailed it. And then I walked back into my cabin, brewed myself some coffee, and sat by the window. The silence felt different this time, not just peaceful, but earned. They wanted me to prove myself, and I did, just not in the way they ever expected. 6 months later, everything in my life looked different. The cabin wasn't just some survival spot anymore, it was home. I ended up buying it from the owner, a retired logger who was shocked anyone even wanted the place. He practically begged me to take it off his hands for cheap, saying, "Son, if you can stand the quiet, it's yours." I signed the papers that same week. When I mentioned the old Mustang in the shed, he laughed and said, "That hunk of metal. If you really got it running, it's yours." Title's probably still in the glove box somewhere. My work in town had picked up big time, too. Rick from the diner introduced me to a guy named Dale, a quiet, older mechanic who'd been running a one-man garage for years but was ready to slow down. We hit it off instantly, same humor, same work ethic, same mutual hatred for clueless customers who thought duct tape could fix anything. After a few weeks of helping him out, he offered to split the rent and let me core in the shop. We called it Iron Ridge Auto, mostly because the town was near Iron Ridge Trail and partly because it sounded like something that belonged on a sign. We didn't do advertising, word of mouth did all the work. Soon, we had people coming from 3 towns over just to get repairs. They liked that we didn't talk down to them or overcharge them like the city shops did. By the end of the first month, we were booked solid. That was more respect than I ever got back home. Speaking of home, word got around eventually. Hannah's version of events made its way back to me through a mutual friend online. Apparently, she was telling people I'd had a breakdown and ran away from everything. She said I couldn't handle the pressure of marriage or work and that she'd tried to help me, but I'd lost my mind. I almost laughed when I heard that. If living in peace, owning property, and running a business counted as a breakdown, then yeah, I was totally broken. I didn't bother correcting her. Let her have her story. People like her need to be the victim in every version of life they tell. As the months passed, I started to really fit in around here. When the 1-year anniversary of being abandoned rolled around, I decided to do something small to mark it, not a pity party, more like a thank you to the people who had unknowingly helped me rebuild my life. I set up a grill outside the cabin and invited everyone who'd been part of my new start: Rick, Dale, a few of the diner regulars, the store owner, and even Earl, the old man who'd first found me and given me those supplies. They all showed up, bringing food, tools, stories, and laughter. Halfway through the night, while I was flipping burgers, my phone buzzed on the porch table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. I heard you bought that place up there. I hope you're happy. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at it for a second, then looked around me, real people laughing, kids chasing each other, music playing, stars starting to break through the sky. I typed 2 words back: I am. Then I deleted the number for good. I thought about everything that led me here: the crappy job, the fake friends, the build character prank that was supposed to humiliate me. Funny thing is, it worked. It built character, all right, just not the way they planned. They tried to make me the joke, and I turned it into a fresh start. They left me behind, and I built a life they couldn't touch. And sitting there on that porch, with the Mustang parked nearby and the quiet hum of crickets filling the air, I realized something simple: they'd freed me. The biggest favor they ever did was walking away laughing, thinking they'd won, because that's when I finally stopped living for anyone else.